If you're interested in buying a computer with an Intel Core processor and don't know the differences between i3, i5, i7, and i9, I'm going to explain what it is. But first, my name is Steve Smith, this is TQA Weekly, and before I get into anything else, if you go to tqaweekly.com, click account, then register, you can actually get these episodes 2 days in advance of everyone else, and as long as you are a member and you're logged in, you will not actually have to deal with advertisements on my site. You benefit from being able to comment on a safe website that is moderated, as well as having access to all the show notes and a whole bunch of other stuff that has to do with this show. And if you are a member of YouTube and you are watching this on YouTube, you might see a button down below written join. You can click that, you can become a part of our family, and you will have the logo as part of your icon beside your name. And if you do that, thank you in advance. So, being someone who worked in a computer store, I know that for some people it can be confusing to understand what the difference is between i3, i5, i7, and i9 are. For a long time, each of those processors did have a fairly standard description. An i3 processor used to be a 2-core, 4-threaded processor. It's the lower end, it's the least expensive, and it's definitely great for things like homework, Netflix, light gaming, light tasks. Basically, this is good for younger people, people with basically mediocre use scenarios, or for older people that don't game. Why buy them an i7 when an i3 is going to be a lot less expensive? And as of the 8th generation, Intel drops hyperthreading in favor of 4 real cores on an i3 processor. And that doesn't make the processor worse, it actually makes it better. Hyperthreading is basically telling each processor to do more. It's a little bit more complicated than that, but that's what it comes down to. So whenever you can actually get real cores over hyperthreading, that's actually better. But when you go towards the top, it doesn't matter as much. It's when you are dealing with lower core clocks that hyperthreading isn't as great as real cores. So the i3 processor, as of the 8th generation, benefits from 4 real cores, where it used to only have 2 real cores, and it was hyperthreaded to emulate 4 cores. And like I said, that's good for the lower end tasks. The i5 Intel Core processors had 4 distinct cores all the way up to the 8th generation. And that was great. This is the sweet spot for gamers. If you are a gamer on a budget, you get an i5 processor and you put as much money as you can into your graphics card, making sure you have a good enough power supply, obviously, for that. And that won't let you do anything you want when it comes to gaming, some video editing, some 3D modeling. Basically, if you're on a budget, the i5 processor platform is what you actually want. As of the 9th generation though, because the i3 and the 8th generation got 4 cores, it now has 6 cores, meaning that it's even better than it was before. So if you're going to buy a 9th generation i5 processor, you're actually getting a much better deal than you would have had if you were going for an 8th generation processor. So it is actually a lot better. And an i5 processor does actually come with an unlocked variant which you can overclock. So that is always good. Then we have to deal with the i7. It used to be the pinnacle performance. And it used to have only 4 cores, yes, and 8 threads. Still better than an i5, even though I said that hyperthreading isn't as great as you would think it is. But it usually came as an unlocked variant. You always had the unlocked variant, and it was only about $10 more anyway. And it was faster than all the previous processors, and you can overclock it, and you can do a bunch of stuff with it. And because of all those threads and multi-threaded workloads being a thing, you can do all the video editing, higher-end gaming, streaming, and all that kind of stuff that you would really want to do. And Intel, for a moment, with the i7-8700K, came out with a 6-core 12-thread variant, which would defeat the previous ones and still be in line with the previous the previous model, the i5, which has 6 cores. And that would allow you to do a lot more tasks. And that processor is probably the sweetest spot for any elitist gamer, because even though there is an i7 9700K, and even though it has 8 cores, there's no longer any hyperthreading, which means that 8 core is essentially just 8 cores. There is no 16 in there. That means that it is possible for a multi-threaded workload to perform better on an i7 8700K than in an i7 9700K. Sure, it's a very slim window, and sure, the 9700K does have a lot of hardware mitigation that deals with some of our previous security issues, but you're going to have to look at this as being am I going to actually really need the 9700K instead of the 8700K? Are my tasks multi-threaded or not? Or do they benefit for more threads? Because remember, you're basically comparing 12 threads of work to 8. And if you need just a few more threads of work for it to actually perform, you're actually better off with the 8700K. And like I said, this is an elitist platform. This is not even a problem for anybody who's just a conventional gamer. If you're a conventional gamer, get an i5. It'll be less confusing for you. And the reason why the i7 doesn't have hyperthreading anymore is because Intel came out with the i9 core processor, which is what starts confusing some people. The i9 9900K processor debuts this year and has 8 real cores and hyperthreads with 16 threads of processing power, comes unlocked, and you can overclock it. And this is what dominates as the elitist level platform for gamers and people with higher end tasks. And that is what a lot of people will strive to get, even though most of you will benefit greatly from an i5 6-core processor for your needs. So if you're wondering what you need, a basic computer to do things like office work on the internet, communicate with people on Skype, or go on to Netflix, you can go with an i3 processor and 8 gigs of RAM and a hard disk. If you want it to perform better, a little better anyway, you can go for an SSD. And of course, you have the option of adding a graphics card later if you ever decide to do a little bit more hardcore gaming. A little bit more. Now, this is a basic computer. You don't really need the graphics card. You can use the onboard. We're talking about a computer that's great for younger people or like older people in your family, or somebody who just needs it to do office work. If you're a gamer, you can take that above computer, the computer we just talked about, and you can stick an i5 processor inside, maybe replace the 8 gigs with 16 or 32 gigs of RAM and put a graphics card in it. If you're wondering what kind of graphics card you need, at 4K you need 4 gigs or greater. And obviously the bigger your graphics card, the better the image quality is going to be and the more frames per second you're going to get. So a gamer can benefit from an i5 having 16 or 32 gigs of RAM, the SSD that I mentioned before, and of course a graphics card with 4 gigs or better. And that is absolutely enough for most gamers and will still handle every game there will be for a long time. And if you wanted to stream though, and edit video, do 3D models, you replace that i5, you put an i7 processor, and if you need more than 8 threads, you go with the 8700K instead of the 9700K. And of course, you can also benefit from SLI, although that is under a few very specific circumstances. You're better off buying a much better graphics card than 2 cheaper graphics cards, trying to link them together. And anyway, NVIDIA removed the SLI option on their 2070s. So you're basically stuck getting 2080s or better to have their SLI. And if you need 12 threads or better, you're definitely going to have to be looking at an i9 9900K. And this is for the super elitist kind of stuff. If you need much more speed, more cores, more threads, then take that i7 out and put an i9 in it, and then be done with it. But be warned, if you're telling me you have an i9 processor and all you're doing is gaming for it, you better be trying to get a better bang for your dollar over the long run, or actually be using this for some pretty hardcore stuff. Because like I said, you don't really need much more than an i5 processor. So like this episode if you liked it, dislike it if you didn't, share with those that you think can benefit from this, and don't forget to subscribe. And if you have any questions, comments, suggestions for topics, email me at ask@tqaweekly.com or go to my website, tqaweekly.com, where you can join, get these episodes 2 days in advance of everyone else, and actually benefit from an ad-free website. Otherwise, if you're on YouTube, you can click down on the join button, be part of the family, and also support this show. Thank you in advance, thank you for watching, and goodbye.